Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. It all started with something so small, something I wouldn't have thought twice about if things hadn't already felt off. I was sitting on the couch one night, casually scrolling through my phone, when I noticed something on our shared Uber account. An address. A new one. We don't usually order rides separately, so seeing this unfamiliar location instantly caught my attention. I figured it was a mistake at first, maybe a wrong address from a ride he took. But something inside me told me to dig deeper. I knew, deep down, something wasn't right. I asked him about it the next morning. He just shrugged it off. Oh, I don't know. Maybe it was a mistake. But why did I feel that weird gut feeling, that little voice in my head whispering that something was wrong? He wasn't acting like himself, almost distant. And that address? It stayed on my mind, gnawing at me. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The address kept haunting me. It wasn't like my husband to be secretive, but there was something in his demeanor that made me question everything. He had become distant, distracted. He would come home late, always with some excuse about work or a late meeting. But I had never seen him work this hard before, at least not with the urgency he had now. Every day, I felt more and more like I was losing him. I couldn't let it go. I started searching. I went through our Uber receipts, checking the times and locations of the rides. That strange address kept popping up. It wasn't just a one-time thing. No, it was a regular stop, a place he'd been visiting often, at odd hours of the night. Was it possible? Could there be someone else? I decided to confront him. "Where were you last night?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my heart was pounding in my chest. He seemed surprised by my question, but quickly recovered. "Just out with some colleagues," he replied. But there was something in his eyes, something that told me he wasn't being truthful. I knew in my gut that he was hiding something, but what? I had to know. So, one evening while he was in the shower, I grabbed his phone. It felt wrong, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was slipping away from me. I opened his messages, hoping to find some kind of clue, anything that would explain the late nights, the secretive behavior. And then, there it was. A message from a woman I didn't recognize, mentioning a second address, asking if he would be there that weekend. My heart sank. The message confirmed it. There was something going on, and it didn't involve me. But I couldn't just sit with that information. I needed to know more. I couldn't understand why he would keep something so important from me. I looked up the address online. It was an apartment, but it wasn't in the best area. What was he doing there? I couldn't stop thinking about it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't keep living in this fog. I had to know the truth, even if it broke me. I had to go to that apartment, see it for myself. I didn't tell him where I was going. I didn't want to give him a chance to cover it up. I got in the car, my hands shaking as I typed the address into my GPS. My mind was racing with questions, none of which seemed to have answers. When I arrived, I could hardly believe what I was seeing. It wasn't just an apartment. It looked like a place he'd been spending a lot of time at. The building was nondescript, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. I parked a few blocks away, watching for any sign of him. And then, I saw him, walking into the building, looking over his shoulder as if making sure no one saw him. My stomach turned. I followed him, keeping my distance. My heart was in my throat as I watched him enter the building. The door buzzed, and a woman's voice answered from inside. He greeted her warmly, and my blood ran cold. They weren't just friends. There was something more. I waited, trying to calm my breath, but every nerve in my body screamed that I was about to uncover a truth I wasn't ready for. I waited for what felt like hours, my mind racing with thoughts of what could possibly be going on. Eventually, I saw him leave, but this time, he wasn't alone. The woman who had answered the door came out behind him, and they stood there, laughing and talking like nothing was wrong. They kissed. I felt the ground beneath me shift. My husband, the man I thought I knew, had been living a double life. I couldn't breathe. The world felt like it was crashing down around me. I was standing there, hidden in the shadows, watching my husband kiss another woman. It was surreal, like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My mind raced with questions, confusion, and anger, but most of all, betrayal. I waited until they were out of sight before I left. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I knew I had to face him, no more running from the truth. That night, when he came home, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "What were you doing?" I asked, my voice shaky but firm. "Where were you?" He looked at me, his face falling as if he'd already prepared for this moment. I can explain," he stammered. But there was no explanation that could make this right. Not now. Not after everything I had seen. He tried to lie his way out of it. He told me that the woman was just a friend, someone from work, but I could see right through him. The more he spoke, the more obvious it became that everything he said was a cover-up. I already knew the truth, but I needed him to admit it. And after a long, uncomfortable silence, he did. I've been seeing her for months. I didn't want to hurt you, he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Months? How could he do this to me? I thought we had built something real, something unbreakable. But here he was, shattering it all with his lies. He told me about the apartment, about how it was his escape from the pressures of our life. He said that he had been struggling with his feelings for a while, and that the second apartment was a place where he could be himself without the weight of his commitments. He didn't want to leave me, he insisted, but he also didn't want to lose her. He was torn between two worlds. I listened to him, but none of it made sense. How could he hide something so significant from me? How could he betray me like this? He claimed it was all a mistake, that he didn't want things to get this far, but the damage was already done. That night, I barely slept. The more I thought about everything, the more I realized that I couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies. How could I trust him again after everything? He had broken me in ways I never thought possible. I had always believed that we shared everything, but now I was left wondering if I ever truly knew him at all. The next morning, I packed a bag. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay here any longer. He begged me to stay, told me he would fix everything, but I was done. I couldn't be the woman who kept accepting lies, who kept pretending like everything was fine. So I left. Leaving him was the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was also the best decision I had made. The days that followed were filled with tears, confusion, and anger. I couldn't believe how easily he had deceived me, how much of our life had been built on a foundation of lies. I stayed with a friend for a while, trying to put the pieces of my life back together. But no matter how much I tried to move on, the memory of the apartment, of his betrayal, kept haunting me. I had to confront the truth. He wasn't the man I thought he was. And as much as I wanted to pretend that everything would be okay, I knew deep down that things would never be the same again. Weeks passed, and he kept calling, texting, showing up at my door with apologies and promises of change. He said he was willing to do anything to make things right, but how could I believe him? After everything that had happened, his words felt empty, like a desperate attempt to hold on to what he had lost. I wasn't sure if I even wanted him back. One night, he came to my friend's house, desperate. "I've messed up," he said. "I never meant for it to go this far. Please, just let me make it up to you." I saw the pain in his eyes, but it didn't change the fact that he had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I spent a lot of time thinking about my next steps. What did I want? Could I ever trust him again? Should I forgive him? But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I had to put myself first. I couldn't let his mistakes dictate my happiness. I had spent years building a life with someone who didn't value me, who kept secrets from me. And now, it was time to build a life for myself, without him. In the end, I chose to walk away. It wasn't easy, and I knew it would take time to heal, but I couldn't keep holding on to someone who had lied to me. The second apartment, the woman, the lies, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was that I was reclaiming my life, my freedom. A few months after I left, I heard through mutual friends that he had moved in with the woman. They had even started talking about marriage. It stung, of course, but it also gave me closure. He had chosen her, and I had chosen myself. I've learned so much about myself during this journey. The heartbreak, the pain, it all pushed me to grow, to rediscover who I am. I've been focusing on my career, my friendships, and my passions. I'm no longer defined by the man who betrayed me. I am my own person, and I'm finally free. It wasn't easy to rebuild. At first, every little thing seemed like a reminder of the life I'd lost. The apartment we shared, the places we visited together, they were all so full of memories that now only caused pain. But gradually, I started filling those spaces with new experiences, new friends, and new dreams. I focused on the things that made me feel alive again, the things that had been buried under the weight of my old life. I joined a book club, started taking yoga classes, and even went on a solo trip to a place I'd always wanted to visit. Every day, I became a little stronger, a little more myself. It wasn't perfection, but it was progress. Months passed before I saw him again. It was at a mutual friend's wedding, of all places. He was with her, the woman who had taken my place in his life. Seeing them together stirred up a storm of emotions. He looked at me, his eyes full of guilt and regret, but I didn't let it show. I smiled, nodded, and kept my distance. I wasn't the woman he left behind anymore. I was someone stronger, someone who had survived. He came over to me during the reception, looking like he was about to apologize again. But I didn't need his apologies. Not anymore. I had already forgiven him. For me, not for him. I knew that he had his own journey to take, and I had mine. It was time to stop living in the past and embrace the future. Letting go was the hardest part. It wasn't about forgiving him. It was about forgiving myself for letting someone who didn't truly love me take so much of my time and energy. I had spent so many years trying to fix a broken relationship, only to realize that it was never truly mine to fix. It was his to break, and now it was mine to leave behind. As time went on, I began to let go of the bitterness, the anger, and the heartbreak. I still had moments of weakness, of course, but I was stronger for having gone through it. I had learned that my worth wasn't tied to anyone else, that I could stand on my own and create the life I wanted. I started seeing someone new, someone who showed me what love should really feel like, gentle, kind, and honest. It wasn't rushed or forced, it was slow and real. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe, like I could trust again. He didn't try to fix me, he just accepted me as I was. And for the first time in years, I felt truly seen. It wasn't just about love. It was about reclaiming myself. I started to feel confident in ways I hadn't before. I put more energy into my career, traveled more, and even started writing again, something I had always loved but had abandoned for so long. The woman I had been before all of this, the one who put everyone else's needs before her own, was gone. And in her place, a stronger, more independent version of me was born. I surrounded myself with people who lifted me up, people who made me feel like I mattered. My friends had always been there for me, but now, I found new relationships that nurtured me. I learned the value of real connections, those that were built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. These were the people who saw me for who I truly was, not who I had been in a past life. One day, out of the blue, I received a letter from the apartment building where my ex-husband had kept his secret place. It was about an overdue payment, a final bill. I had no interest in contacting him about it, but it brought back memories of how much I had tried to ignore the signs of his betrayal. The apartment had been a symbol of his lies, but now it was just another part of my past that I had let go of. I thought about it for a moment and then shredded the letter. It didn't matter anymore. His secrets, his lies, his second life, they had nothing to do with me now. I had always been afraid of being alone, of not being enough. But through this journey, I realized how much strength I had within me. I had survived betrayal, heartbreak, and the loss of someone I thought I could trust. And in the end, I was still standing. I was enough. I learned that the end of one chapter doesn't define you. It only opens the door to the next one. And in that moment, I knew that the future was mine to shape. I stopped looking back. It wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about understanding that the future held so much more than I could ever imagine. I had built something beautiful for myself, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away. I had learned to be my own hero, to stand tall even when the world tried to knock me down. Every day was a new opportunity to grow, to love, and to live. And that was enough. I never saw him again after that wedding. Our paths never crossed in the same way. And that was exactly how I wanted it. He was a part of my past, but he no longer had any hold over my future. I had moved on, and so had he. As I looked at the life I had built, I couldn't help but smile. I was free to be who I wanted to be, to love who I wanted to love, and to live my life on my own terms. I had come a long way from the woman who had once thought she couldn't survive without him. But now I knew better. I was enough on my own. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you liked the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.